So the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, was established in the end of May 1964. Guess who visited Cairo in Egypt in the beginning of May 1964? The leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. And this is the most important thing you need to know about the so-called Palestinian people. It's a Soviet invention. This is the emblem of the PLO. As you can see, it covers the entire land of Israel. Don't you think it's funny that on the same month that Khrushchev is visiting Cairo and saying that Israel is a danger to the peace of the Middle East, then the same month the PLO is established? Don't you think it's quite a coincidence? It's not, but it's not like it was invented right then. Actually, it's a very long process. You need to ask the question: how come the PLO was only established in 1964, when the pro-Palestinians are saying that Palestine was occupied since 1948? What took them 15 years? And it's a very good question, what they were doing until then. But the answer is actually that they didn't even know that there is a Palestinian people. So the people in Gaza, people in Judea and Samaria, they didn't call themselves Palestinians until someone came and told them, hey, you are Palestinians, you are oppressed, you all have to resist and fight against Israel. Okay, someone had to come and tell them that they themselves didn't know that. That's a fact. All right, now let's go back in time and see what happened before that. Okay, so before there was the PLO, what was it, or who represented the Arabs, or their interests, or their plight? And let's go back. Now, let's go back to November 1947, when the UN suggested the partition plan, partitioning of the British Mandate of Palestine to a Jewish state and to an Arab state. Okay, this is a suggestion by the UN. The Jews accepted this plan and were planning to declare their independence in May 1948, when the British are due to leave. Okay, now the Arab rejected the plan, but check this out. The plan was to establish a Jewish state, but also an Arab state. So people are focusing on the Arabs rejecting the Jewish state because that's understandable. Okay, what they don't understand is that they also rejected the plan to establish an Arab state. And this is something super important in understanding that actually the Arabs in general didn't plan to establish an Arab state in this territory. And actually, each part of the Arab world saw this territory as something that if you take it by force, then it's legally belong to its country. So Egypt invaded Israel in 1948 because it really thought it's going to conquer Tel Aviv in a day, and then the entire territory is going to be part of Egypt. Jordan, it wasn't called Jordan, it was called Transjordan at that time. They really thought that they're going to conquer Israel in a matter of days, and the entire area going to be a part of their land. Syria, the same thing. So those countries didn't have any plan to have like an Arab state in this specific territory of the land of Israel, and they all tried to make it their own. So they didn't. So the Arab countries themselves didn't think that there is a Palestinian people at that specific time. And the evidence to that is that in January 1948, the Palestinian general management was established, but it didn't get any kind of legitimacy from the Arabs in the land. It was just one of those organizations which was said to represent the Arabs, but it didn't. Okay, and it ended up that in September 1948, in Gaza, the government of all of Palestine was established, and and the thing is, it was this organization that claimed to rule all of the Arabs in the land of Israel was completely illegitimate. Nobody acknowledged it. It was headed by by Haj Amin al-Husseini mainly, and because Haj Amin al-Husseini was a notorious figure that every single one in the Arab world hated him, especially in the end of Israel. He wasn't a very nice guy. I mean, besides the fact that he was a good friend of Hitler, and he was a Nazi by himself. By the way, him being a Nazi was the only good point of him in the Arab eyes, you know. So, okay, he's a Nazi, okay, but he's also a very bad guy. Okay, so this is the way that they see it. Okay. He basically killed anyone that didn't agree with him, and because of that, basically all the other families and nobles in the land of Israel of Arabs didn't get along with him, like Nashashibi, for example. So he, because it was headed by him, then Egypt and Jordan and Iraq didn't acknowledge that. So they didn't have any kind of support from the Arab countries. And more than that, a month afterwards, in October 1948, Israel counterattacked against the Egyptians' invasion to Israel, and they invade Gaza and they push the Egyptian back to Egypt. So that government, the government of all of Palestine, they simply went away to Cairo. Yeah, they didn't even try to fight. And they stayed in Cairo, okay? And over there, they since they didn't have any kind of real position, they didn't have any power, it was really just a virtual organization. And in reality, Gaza was ruled by the Egyptians after the ceasefire with Israel was signed, okay, in July 1949, I'm sorry. So this government basically became completely meaningless, okay? And this organization was eventually closed down by the Egyptians in 1959. Okay, now more than that, already in December 1948, Transjordan did a congress in Jericho, and it annexed Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, to Jordan, basically. So from the Jordanian point of view, they didn't plan to have any kind of Palestinian state. And the Egyptians as well, they didn't plan to have any kind of Palestinian state. And the same thing for the Syrians. Now, what happened over the years is that there was a process of events that happened in the Middle East and also in the West that changed the Arab countries' views. And because of that, there was a necessity to find another way, and that way was actually by establishing the PLO. And all of it is from the objective of destroying Israel. Okay, now you need to understand that after the ceasefire was signed with Israel in July 1949, the Egyptians hurry up and they used the refugees population in Gaza to send terror attacks and asymmetric war against the Israelis. Okay, terror attack, and also the Jordanians did the same thing. So terror attacks. Arabs will they will infiltrate to the border, and they will blow up houses. They will murder people. They will slaughter children and women. And Israel responded. But because it's asymmetric war, the idea of asymmetric war is that if Egypt attacked you, but it's not Egypt, okay? So Egypt is sending people from its territory, and it hitting targets in Israel, but you can't go attack Egypt because it's not Egypt. It's just insurgent from Egypt. So it makes things really hard. And in the days of if you are a modern Western democracy, and you have TV and you have radio and you have newspaper and you have liberals and judges and all this other stuff, it's really hard to fight against an asymmetric war. Okay, and this is why they weaponize that. Okay, now another thing that you need to remember is that in the 50s, another thing happened, which is the War of Sinai in 1956. And in the War of Sinai, Israel conquered the Sinai Desert, which is 3 times its size, in a week, less than a week actually. And that basically showed the Egyptians that Israel is a very strong country, and it's probably not going to be conquered in a day or a week. This whole idea of conquering Israel like this, it was understood then by the Egyptians that the way that they're doing things is not working. And there were other events as well. For example, from the Egyptian point of view, in 1958, Egypt and Syria became one country. There was a union. It was called the United Arab Republic, and it was a union between Egypt and Syria. And this actually promoted the idea of pan-Arabism. Arabism, basically the dream, the Arab dream by Nasser, of having like a united state of Arabs, like the entire Arab world should unite into one big superpower, utilizing and weaponizing all the oil and the weapons and the population to a big empire or something like this. But the thing is that this union between Syria to Egypt was a complete disaster. And eventually in 1961, the Egyptians were so they're abusing the Syrians, so the Syrians simply broke off from this union and just told the Egyptians to fuck off. So both the Egyptians and both the Syrians kind of like start to understand that this idea of having a one country, like one country which is a union of all of our Arab countries, is an absurd idea, because let's face it, Arabs don't get along with one another, and this is why it doesn't work. So the idea of uniting and having one big country is so absurd. So when you think about that, there is an opening for alternative idea, and this is where the idea of a separate Palestinian state in where was Palestine is became a bit more clear. Okay. So let's talk about the West. In the beginning, when Israel was established, American President Truman and Eisenhower were accepting but not very warm toward Israel. When Israel was established, first of all, the Americans supported the UN partition plan in November 1947. And then when Israel declared independence, they acknowledged Israel as a state. But you need to understand something very important, is that during the time of Truman and the time of Eisenhower, Israel did not get any like military support or any economic support from the Americans. Many people says that Israel was established by the Americans and it lives on American aid, but that was not, it's not true now, and it wasn't true then. More than that, the Americans actually imposed a weapons embargo over Israel. So the Americans were not selling weapons to the Israelis during the War of Independence. So that's something that you need to understand. During the War of Independence, 1947, 1949, the Americans did not sell weapons to Israel. It sounds insane, right? But that was the reality. The Israelis found another ways to find weapons, though. And they end up using some American weapons as well, not just not mainly, but some, yes. But things changed quite dramatically when JFK was elected in 1961, and he was actually the first American president to sell weapons to Israel. It's actually very remembered. The Israelis actually remember that as a very emotional move, because he sold Israel the Hawk um, anti-tank missile. And so it was all over the news. It was a big event, and basically the friendship between Israel and America became very, very deep from the time of JFK. You cannot talk about a deep or special relationship between Israel to the Americans before that. But because of that, the Soviets actually became very hostile to Israel, because they thought that Israel will be one day maybe a communist country, and they hoped that Israel gonna be leading to the Soviet side. So that was also one of the things that also convinced the Arabs, like the Egyptians and the Jordanians and the Syrians, that right now the Americans are also supporting Israel. So it's really bad news. Everything we did until now was not working. So this basically put the playground for the understanding of all parties in the region and the Soviets, that the way that they are doing things and as it is not working. And if they want to continue to make an effort and labor in order to destroy Israel, they have to do it in another way. And this has made the opening for the creation of the Fatah and later the PLO. All right. Just a small correction: the Hawk was an anti-aircraft missile. I think that I said that it was an anti-tank missile. It was a very famous air, like a ground-to-air system. Now let's talk about the Soviets. Stalin was anti-Semitic. Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union until 1953, was anti-Semitic. But even though he was anti-Semitic, he supported the establishment of the State of Israel. He supported the partition plan in November 1947, and then when Israel declared its independence in May 1948, the Russians supported it, and also they acknowledged the State of Israel. More than that, Stalin allowed countries which were under the influence of the Soviets, like Czechoslovakia and Hungary, for example, to sell Soviet-made weapon to Israel, and Israel used that weapon in order to fight against the Arabs and against the British, and Israel won. Of course, it was not. By the way, it was not the most advanced weapon. It was really just a surplus. In many times it was leftovers, old broken weapon. We didn't get Kalashnikov weapon or something like this. We didn't get a T-30 or something like this. We didn't get anything like this. Really, we get like some like old weapon, but we used that, and we won the war anyhow. While the Egyptians and the Jordanians really had the best equipment that the British were manufacturing in that time. So they had Spitfire, and they had Messerschmitt and all this other stuff. But anyhow, in regards to this, to the Soviets, Stalin was anti-Semitic, but on the same time he was it was kind of like in favor of Zionism, because he really thought that, okay, if this will make the Jews leave and be away, then that may be a good thing. So, and this is actually really what he believed. He was really anti-Semitic. In 1953, he accused Jewish doctors of murdering Communist Party members by giving them the wrong prescription or giving them the wrong diagnosis or something like this, which was, of course, a complete fake. And because of that, there were some Jews that were arrested, tortured, executed. Some were sent to exile in Siberia. Really just poor people that didn't do anything bad. The only fault was that they were Jewish. And after he died, this trend actually continued of being basically of a much more anti-Semitic Soviet Union. And the next leader after Stalin, eventually it became Khrushchev. There was another guy in between, very short time, Khrushchev. So Khrushchev he continued this trend of anti-Semitism in general, and he used that. Oh, okay. So also for Khrushchev, you need to understand, for Khrushchev, the idea that Zionism and communism cannot be in the same place was completely understood to Nikita Khrushchev. But from the Israeli point of view, communism and Zionism are not exactly one against another. As you see in the kibbutz, you have people which are Zionists, but also they are communist. But from Nikita Khrushchev point of view, this is something that is completely doesn't make any sense. It's like basically saying that you support Palestine, but you also support Israel. You can't. These days, you cannot do it. You cannot do it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, Khrushchev is a Soviet leader that really intensified the Cold War. He was a very dangerous person. We were very close to have a nuclear war, basically a third World War because of Nikita Khrushchev. He was a very, very unstable, very hostile Russian leader, and we're actually very lucky. All of us are very lucky to be alive. That nothing happened during his time, because he was actually very close to that. And by the way, if he wanted to, he could just destroy Israel in a second by firing a nuclear bomb on Israel, basically killing everyone, God forbid. But he didn't do it, which is lucky. But instead, what he did is that he was using the method of asymmetric war, which I'm going to tell you all about it, okay? So the idea with asymmetric war is something that the Soviets developed in the beginning when it comes to fighting against the Nazis with the partisans, but it developed even more that fighting against another country, an actual country, must have some sort of pretext. It could be anything. It could be anything. Basically, you cannot just take one group among the many groups that are living in a country, and for no reason, these groups start to explode houses and burn fields and kill people indiscriminately every Saturday or something like this. There must be some sort of a pretext. And the idea is that they have a plight. They have some grievance. Sound familiar? All right. So it's an idea which is very, very sick. It's a sick idea. And this idea that basically everyone that has a grievance, his only way to find solution to his grievance is by using extreme violence and vilification and hate until all of your demands are met. You continue with violence, and fighting and bullying. It's a way of bullying. It's a method of bullying, but not bullying one person, but bullying an entire nation, an entire culture, with the cause of breaking the society from the inside, from those that says, let's give in to those bullies so we can live, to those that says, no, we must fight against those bullies, and because they want to kill us one by one. By that, separating the society and antagonizing it one against another. So it's actually it's a double-edged attack on a society. That it's a physical attack on a society, bits by bits, like mosquito bites, sometimes bigger bites. But also it's the idea is to make the society more problematic, more chaotic, more traumatic, basically. I mean, look at the Israeli society, for example. In the year 2000, 2001, you had a suicide bomb attack in major cities. You have bus explosion, terrorists explode themselves, killing people. So there were some people that are saying, oh, we must fight them. We must kill them and to the last of one. And then you have those other people that are saying, no, we must give them piece of land. We must make a peace agreement for them, So, and those people on both sides, they're fighting again. They are not fighting, they are arguing against each other, okay? And they are antagonizing against one. So this is actually the cause of those, it's called active measure. This is actually active measure, basically. So now you understand what I'm talking about. So the Soviets, not just Nikita Khrushchev, but Nikita Khrushchev basically made it into its peak. The idea of creation organization in Western countries, that they're actually doing some serious violence, murdering attack, hijack and theft and robbery, in order to scare the normal people to give in to whatever they want. And this is actually terror, the idea of bullying, with not just bullying in school, basically bullying in general, bullying the entire country. So, but you need to have a pretext, okay? So this entire story of the Palestinian people was actually created as an excuse, as a pretext for why they are killing people, why they are blowing up, they are attacking, they do this and this. So this story was actually created, and they revamp the government of all of Palestine that I was telling you before, that was created by the Husseini. They revamped this idea 20 years afterwards, and they already adopted groups that existed, and they utilized that in a new organization. What I'm talking about is that in 1959, some Arabs from the land of Israel, and also from Egypt and Syria, like Ahmad Shukeri, Yasser Arafat, Abu Iyad, Abu Ziyad, Abu Emmo, all those guys, which were very educated people, influenced by the KGB, educated by the Soviet. They created the Fatah, the first organization for the liberation of Palestine. But it was a very small organization. Those guys like Yasser Arafat, they used their own business in order to finance the organization. And finally, in 59, yes, 60, the Syrians granted some assistance, and they start using them as insurgents against Israel and also against Jordan. They couldn't find support in Gaza or Judea and Samaria. They couldn't find it. And but those guys eventually were this idea was hijacked by the Soviets, and with the assistance of the Arab League, they created in 1964. They created the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. All right, and over there they manifest this idea of asymmetric war and the idea of active measure. So you have terror, which is bullying, and a pretext, a grievance, basically. So and they amplified this story in the media, left-wing media, and they use other left-wing organization all over the world. Whenever there were communists, the idea of the Palestinians, this new idea of Palestinians, which was not heard before, was promoted. All right. Now you need to understand something that is insane, but it's actually true. That for someone that living in Gaza in 1964, someone that lives in Nablus or East Jerusalem, or in Hebron, or even in a refugee camp in Lebanon or in Syria or in Jordan, he didn't know that he's a Palestinian. He thought that he's an Arab. And all of a sudden there is an organization, and it's a terror organization. They are violent and they are very strong. They have money and they can do whatever they want. If you don't agree with them, they're gonna rape your sister basically and behead you. So they were basically bullying their own society to accept this imposed identity called the Palestinian. So, and this is basically, like they're saying, all of a sudden we were Jordanian and all of a sudden we became Palestinian. So this identity was imposed on the people by bullying, by threatening them, by killing them. And a new generation, was raised in the 70s, and they were told from day one, you are Palestinian, this is the land of Palestine, the Jews stole your land, Jerusalem is the most important city for you, you must die, you must fight and die for Palestine, and you must kill the Jews. So they educated already in the 70s a new generation of people that all their life they just hear the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, really. So they are Nazis on steroid, basically. But this is all a creation, putting things together, active measure by the KGB. It didn't exist before that. In the 50s, there wasn't such a thing, all right? And this is, and I'm talking about right now, about maybe what, some many years, 50 years after that, more than 50 years, by the way. And actually, yes, it's 70 years, 80 years since the PLO was established, I think. And they didn't achieve much. They just kill a lot of people, you know. But I think that it's just so funny how this active measure by the KGB was so successful to convince so many people that there's actually a people called Palestinians, and it's a complete invention. It's a complete artificial invention.